So for this tutorial, I decided to pick up the simplest example of the mannequin for the avatar, a pre-rigged avatar in Mixamo, in order to show you that it's possible to customize animation for any rig and how to do it easily in Blender for the specific cases, especially for fashion or like any timetable animations. First of all, we need to download the model of the avatar in FBX format without any animation, just in the T-pose. So make sure that you have the T-pose. For example, you can accidentally apply the animation, and in order to turn it off and to remove that, you just need to press the cross at the right screen at the sidebar and to remove that. So awesome. Now we have the T-pose. We need to press download. Let's check it. Yes, you have the T-pose and press download. That's all what we need for the first step. The next step which we need to do is just to open our Blender, any new scene, and to import our avatar into this scene. So let's go to File, Import, find the FBX, press FBX. Now I have two options, so let me to import the first one. So in the settings, we don't need to set up anything specific. So sometimes you just need to play with the scale because, some of the avatars from Mixamo can be exported weirdly. So at this stage, you just don't need to set up anything, and let me to import avatar into the scene. The next step which we need to do is to shift the rig in front of the avatar in order to make our animation process a little bit easier. So for that, you just need to select the rig, then to go to the sidebar tab, which is called Data, then to open Viewport Display feature and to check the checkbox in front. Now we need to prepare our avatar for the animation. So what I'm talking actually about. First of all, you need to select the rig and to check the timeline. As you can see on the timeline, there is two pre-installed, adjusted by Mixamo, two keyframes. We need to remove them. In order to remove them, you just need to select them, pressing A, or just selecting manually using your left mouse button, and press X on your keyboard and delete the keyframe. The next step is quite essential. You also need to be sure before animating the avatar that you press the auto keying, automatic keyframe insertion for objects. So it allows us to record the animation, moving our cursor over the timeline and to create the animation without any manual settings. So just during the process. Also make sure that you turn it off when you don't want to record any edits. So let's start from the very first frame. We need to go to the pose mode. You need to press the tab button on your keyboard and go to the pose mode. And here you can see all of the bones selected. Let me to change the view. No, not like that. Yeah, like that. So all bones are selected. First of all, I want to create the keyframe, the very first keyframe for the whole avatar for all of the bones. We need to select all of the bones, pressing A or selecting them manually, and just to press the I button on your keyboard. So it creates the very first frame from all of the buttons. Now I want to turn on the auto keying and to start creating the pose for my avatar. You can do it fluently, just moving all arms, shoulders, hands, everything's around. Yeah, just let me to speed up a little bit the process. You need to move a little bit down the whole body of the avatar. As you can see, this is the quite big space between the floor, so the horizontal axis and the avatar's feet. So it's very important just to make it a little bit more natural, like to actually put it on the floor. So that's what we need to do. The next stage, which I'm going to do, and I find it's quite important, is to set up the bones positions for the hands. Yeah, it takes lots of time, but also quite essential and crucial thing because it gives more natural look for the avatar. Now we need to create the pivot point because I want to animate my character around 360 degrees rotation. So in order to do that, I want to create the empty object, like plane axis, which are going to be our pivot point for the avatar. and we're going to create animation of the rotation for the pivot point, but not for the armature. So let's select the pivot point first and to animate that. First, what I'm going to do is just, again, go into the very first keyframe. Here, I'm going to press I in order to save in the memory all of the possible keyframes inside of the pivot object. So then I'm going to move it at the end of the timeline, visible timeline, which is very important. I'm going to change the Z-axis rotation. So as you can see, if I rotate it on the Z, it's going to rotate on the Z-axis, so which is obvious. So let's create the minus 360. So I love minus. I don't know. I don't like positive. And it works correctly at this stage. But the only one thing which I don't like about that maybe sometimes it's quite convenient, but what we actually don't need, that Blender creates automatically ease and out animation for any keyframes. You see that it's going a little bit faster than accelerating, yeah, and then it slows down. Yeah, we don't need, we want to get the linear animation of the rotation. So in order to do that, you just need to select both of the keyframes of the rotation at the timeline, press the right mouse button and to go to interpolation mode and to select linear animation. So that's what we want to get. So it just rotates linearly without any defections of the animation. Yeah, that's what we want to get. Awesome. Don't forget to save your file of every process in order not to lose your progress. Now it's a perfect time to animate our avatar on the rotation of our pivot point. So first of all, we need to connect our armature to the pivot point, because you can see that pivot point rotates, but our armature doesn't. Select the armature first, then select the end object, our pivot point, which we want to connect our armature to. So then select the right button and find the parent and then select object. Or you always can use shortcuts, but I just can't get used to them, to be honest. And as you can see, finally we can rotate our character. And it works well. Now we are ready to start animating, creating the slightly custom animation of the avatar on the timeline. So for that, I just need to select armature, go to the pose mode again. As you can see, I already turned on the rotate mode. So what is very important is just to make sure that orientation is local, not default, not global, nothing else but local. So it's very important in order to keep it on the right position. So I want to start moving the character from the probably 80th frame. So let's move a little bit his back. Yeah, I want to play a little bit around his spine. I also just found out that his arms looks a little bit weird at this position. Just let me to make them a little bit, like I just need to bond them a little bit in order to make them look more organic and natural. Yeah, but as you can see, the pose is very uncomfortable. Let's get back. I also want this character rotating his head as if it is just following the viewer, just staring at the viewer while it's rotating. So that's how our animations work. To be honest, I find it a little bit weird that we don't move any leg, but we don't need it at this stage. So yeah, but as you can understand, you can move whatever you want, any bone. So just make sure that your auto keying is turned on. Then at this point, maybe 160, I'm gonna get back his spline. Not spline, what I'm talking about again. Okay, let's check how it looks like. It's just following the viewer. I also probably want to move a little bit his shoulder, this one. Yeah, but as you can see, I haven't got if I select the shoulder, I haven't got any keys on the timeline, yeah, before, like, except the very first one. In order to not to create a very slow animation of the shoulder, I just want it move a little bit faster. And this stage, I'm just going to move to shift the cursor on the timeline on the 100 keyframes, then press I So it means that the animation of my shoulder will start from the 100 to 160. So it will take just 60 frames for it to be animated. So then I'm going to shift it a little bit down, to move a little bit down, and yeah, very cheeky. Super cheeky. And at the end frame, what I want to do, I want to loop the animation. And in order to create the very last frame, I just need to select all of the bones. So then to move back to the very, very first keyframe to make sure that we are really happy about this animation, to select all of the bones, then to select all of the keyframes here on the timeline, copy them, and pass them at the very end of our animation. So awesome. Now we have the rotation. Now we have the custom animation of the character, and he looks really cheeky. Now I'm going to mention some very important steps I also follow when I create my 3D pieces using Claw. So maybe someone doesn't know, for someone these recommendations will be quite useful. So we all know that it's easier, way more easier to dress the avatar in Claw in the T-pose. But so what are we going to do after that? Yeah, how can we get into the animated option, yeah, and morphed one? So what do we need to do? Get back to the object, select the armature of our avatar, and we need to duplicate it. So select the whole hierarchy to select the armature and the mesh inside of the armature. Press Shift plus D to duplicate the avatar, and then we need to hide the previous one. So what I'm going to do right now is just to bake our animation and to save the Alembic file, which is prepared for the Claw. In order to animate it there, then to download from Claw our animated Claw thing. So in order to bake the avatar, I'm not going to bake it with the rotation, yeah, because in Claw, the rotation will take lots of memory, will take lots of power of the system. So we just don't need the rotation at this stage. And in order to get rid of the rotation, we need to shift the cursor on the timeline for the very first frame and to find the object tab at the sidebar and to press empty at the parent feature. So just press empty, and we disconnected it with the rotation thing. So I'm going to hide it for the moment. So the next step, which I'm going to do, I want to prepare the T-pose and the morph pose, which I'm going to dress up before I animate that. In order to do that, I just need to go to the pose mode again and select all of the bones of my avatar, to select all of the keys except the very first one, and just to delete them. So yeah, as you can see, now we have the static model. The next step which I need to do is to select the very first animation and to move it onto the 20th frame. So it's still static. I'm just going to save the 20th frame as a morph pose, and the very 0 frame I'm going to create the T-pose. So in order to create the T-pose for the first frame, I need to select all of the bones, go to the pose. I'm working in the pose mode, go into the pose, clear, transform all. Now we have the T-pose and a morph pose. It will help us to create the morph target in Claw 3D after we dress our T-pose. Now let's save all of the files for the Claw 3D. So let's go for the very first frame. I'm going to save first the T-pose. Let's select only the mesh. We don't need armature for object. Let's go to File, then Export, and find wavefront object. Press it, then save it somewhere where you need to save that. Make sure that you check the box selection only. That's quite important at this stage. Then export. Just wait a moment. I'm going to add the T to the name of the object, so I just need to differentiate them. So, and the next one, I'm moving my cursor on the timeline onto 20th frame. Then I didn't unselect the mesh. I go to File, select Export, then OBJ, the same stuff, selection only, and I'm going to export it as, it's going to be our morph target. Export. I am finally ready for the baking, preparing the avatar for baking. So let's select our armature, and now we need to duplicate, select the whole hierarchy, to duplicate our avatar again and to disconnect it with the pivot. Awesome. And in order to save the right Alembic file, we need to bake the animation. It's very important to say to the Alembic file that we want to keep all of every keyframe animated on the timeline. So because Alembic file doesn't understand the pre-installed and pre-installed animations of Blender. So here's what we're gonna do. We need to go to the pose mode of our selected armature again, to select all of the bones, to go to the pose, and at this stage we need to find animation and bake action. So make sure that everything is correct here. So usually by the default everything works correctly. Press OK, wait for a few seconds, and our animation for the cloth simulation is ready. So let's export that. Let's go to the object mode. First of all, I want to save the the file. Then, before saving the Alembic, let's select the whole hierarchy, avatar or armature, and our avatar's mesh. Then go to File, find Export Settings, find Alembic, press Alembic. Here, you need to be sure that you selected the box selection only. Make sure that you have the right frames from 1 to 250. Then, if you have any morphs, like subdivisions, make sure that you checked the apply. I don't need this at the moment. And also by the default, you have the selected checkbox for particles. Just uncheck them. You don't need them for this stage for any Alembic simulations in Cloth 3D. So, and now we can say export Alembic. The final quite important part I wanted to share with you is how to import the avatar into Cloth 3D and how to work with the T-pose and Morph pose. And it's going to be quite helpful for you in order to set up very difficult fashion designs. So let's go to Cloth and let's import our OBJ. I want to start from the T-pose without any specific preferences. And let's dress it up a little bit, just in order to see how does it work. Okay, now we finally got our fashionista look, and now we need to morph this T-pose, to morph it to the very first keyframe where our animation will start on our Alembic file. In order to do that, we just need to create the morph target for our OBJ of the T-pose. So go to File, Import Add, OBJ, find your morph pose, press Open. Then we need to find a very important feature, which is called Object Type. And here at this stage, we need to change avatar onto morph target. So it will help us to create the animation between our T-pose and the first frame, first frame where we're going to start our animation at Alembic. That's it. Now we have that. And the final step, in order to start simulating the clothing, we need to remove our OBJ from the space, then to go to File, import our Alembic at this stage. What's quite important here at this stage, you need to be sure that the quantity of frames is exactly like the quantity of frames you created and you worked with in Blender. So you can always check it, getting back to Blender and to go to the settings. So not the right one. Here. The tab calls output. You can go to the output at this sidebar and to find frame rate and to make sure that you work at the 30 frames. FPS. Awesome. Let's get back to Claw. Here's everything's fine. Press OK, and now our avatar is fully ready for the simulation. Our simulation is ready. I want to select all of the comments and to export it for Blender. Yes, we need to use Alembic Agava. Let's press it. Let's call it as an example. Save. And at this stage, I prefer to use the thin mode because you always can apply the solid modifier in Blender. It saves a little bit of memory. It's of course not about quality, but memory is everything. So then press OK, and we just need to wait for a few seconds when our Alembic file is ready. And let's get back to Blender. So now we need to export, not to export, to import it to Blender. Let's find import Alembic, our example Alembic file, and without any preferences, we just inputted that. Let me to hide all of the extras in order to see how the final animation looks like. Awesome. And the very final touch, which I want to do, first of all, I just want to hide the skeleton. So because now it irritates me a lot. And I'm going to hide the extra armature I created, and I want to unhide our empty with like pivot, the avatar with pivot. And I just first, like everything, what I just need to do is just to connect our animated Alembic file of the clothing to the pivot point, which we created before. So in order to do that, I'm going to select our clothing to make sure that I'm at the very first keyframe, then select the pivot point, and to repeat the parenting action which we already done and connect it as object. So let's see once again what we have. Now we have the linear animation of the avatar, quite customed and easy. Awesome, that's done.